Would you mind giving a formal introduction to the listeners of who and what you are according to you, and also an introduction of who you are according to your good doctors and those who are your victims?
Certainly. Hello, my name is H.G. Tudor. I am a greater elite narcissist. To the good doctors, I am a narcissistic sociopath. And to my victims, I am many different things.
That that makes a lot of sense. What you said, and in other pieces of information that I've come across, I've heard things when it comes to, I guess, the lessers and the mid-rangers, with them not knowing what they are. I've heard that they can be very pushy.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
No, continue.
Yeah, they can be very pushy and try to get into a relationship or have sex really, really soon. It's like everything is very fast paced. It's like they're in a rush to get you into a certain position.
Absolutely. There are many red flags in terms of the seduction, the speed at which it happens, the fact that there is a desire to monopolize your time. There is the compliments and comments that are made, which might seem excessive, but they're compliments nevertheless, which people will accept. And it's all done at a considerable pace, sometimes over the top, but it always comes with a ring of truth, some credibility to it, whereby somebody might say, I've been in love with you for the last 10 years. And you think, well, how on earth is that possible? And you say, 10 years, how so? The narcissist will say, well, we've worked together for 10 years and every day I've had to walk past your desk. And you might not have noticed it, but whenever I've spoken to you, I've always found it to be wonderful, etc. And that's how I fell in love with you. It's complete garbage. But to the victim, it sounds romantic. Most victims are love devotees. So as a consequence, this romanticism appeals to them. But also, it sounds credible. This person does work with the victim, has been there for 10 years, does walk past the desk. So perhaps it could happen. And of course, often the victim, because of who they are, wants the attention as well. And when somebody is paying them lovely attention, being complimentary and flattering, who is not going to like that? And it fulfills a need that they have. It scratches an itch. So as a consequence, they will respond to it. So this is why a lot of the red flags, of which there are many, are either ignored or not heeded, because they come against a backdrop of complete plausibility. And people are susceptible to this. They get caught up in it. And if they happen to question it, they are either easily persuaded by us or they persuade themselves, because they don't want to lose what on the face of it appears to be a fantastic, interesting, engaging and loving person.
Yeah, you're right. I've heard stories like that, to where a longtime friend from like 10 years ago will like show up and say, you know, I've always loved you, and you know, I've just been waiting for the right time to tell you. And it is very strange, and I've always questioned people that share those type of stories, and I say, but 10 years have gone by, like how is that? A lot happens within that time frame, so something just doesn't seem right about that. So
exactly, but it's often that's the case. That's done with, of course, the benefit of hindsight, because at the time you're caught up in the moment, and that's what we rely on. And bear in mind, we don't go after, in the main, normal individuals. We go after the very people that are susceptible to all of these manipulations. That's why they work. And people don't know about our kind in terms of awareness. If you were to go to a school and ask the 18-year-olds who've started dating and so on, do you know what a narcissist is? I dare say most of them won't. One or two might say somebody that loves themselves. They'll have no idea what it means. They'll have no idea what to look for. They'll have no idea of the consequences of becoming entangled with one. But several of those people in that class will already have interacted with narcissists in family and friends and are likely to be entangled in a romantic sense. But they have no idea what is coming. And that's why we're able to act with impunity, because there is this repeated behavior by media and publications to euphemize what is abusive behavior and to euphemize what is the behavior of a narcissist by describing it as he's a commitment phobe, or she's just not into you, or I guess he's not ready to settle down yet, or she's highly strung, or he just has a high sex drive. Many of these things are given euphemistic labels when in actual fact they are key indicators of narcissistic behavior, but people don't do it because they don't know what to look for. And they are channeled along by programs, for example, such as Sex and the City, which was so guilty of making a narcissistic individual look like a bit of a lovable rogue who couldn't make his mind up whether to marry somebody or be in a relationship with somebody, when he was quite clearly a narcissist. Glossed it over. So people watching that, and people, of course, do take many cues, particularly younger people, from what's pumped out by the media. They look at that and just say, oh, well, yeah, my boyfriend's like that, so I guess he's just not ready to settle down yet, is he? Or he's not rung me because it's, oh, yes, treat him mean to keep him keen. Rubbish. It's a silent treatment that he's given you because he's manipulating you. He's doing it on purpose to ascertain the extent by which he can control you, but you don't know that because nobody tells you that you're dealing with what is likely to be a narcissistic individual.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because before we started our session, I came up with another question that dealt specifically on if you could name certain television shows or movies that are very good indications of narcissism or psychopathy, and just these type of labels, to where people can, since people are tuned in so heavily to mainstream media and television shows and things like that, to where they can actually know what they're looking at. Because I've seen some things to where now that I'm aware of what narcissism is, when I think back to movies that I've watched or television shows that I've watched, I realize, like, oh my God, that was like full-blown narcissism. So
exactly. Well, once you know what it is, you spot it everywhere.
Yes.
Now, that's not to say that necessarily the individual is a narcissist. It may be that they have narcissistic traits, and one always has to exhibit caution, because there is obviously the clinical medical definition of narcissistic personality disorder, which would be applied whereby you've had a proper chance to assess and observe an individual. However, getting to that situation is rather difficult, because our kind would not submit to that and would manipulate the situation. So it's rather difficult. And as a consequence, one can make a fairly good approximation of an individual and say, that person is a narcissist. You may not say it in terms of a pure clinical diagnosis, because I can't give that, because I'm not a medical professional. But what I can say is, I know my kind and I know what goes on in our minds. So I am able to say, I recognize those behaviors as the behaviors that I engage in, or I recognize the behaviors in that program of the way that my mother behaves, or my uncle behaves, or the chap at work behaves. And over time, when you've experienced our kind, you will spot us absolutely everywhere. I had an individual who consults with me. She described her situation. I explained to her she was entangled with a narcissist. We went through it in detail. She then realized that her mother was one. And then she realized that a friend was one. Yeah. And she said, I've been sleepwalking all these years, and now it makes perfect sense as to why they did what they did, said what they said, and behaved in all these different ways. And she found it especially enlightening and empowering. And you'll be able to look around and say, in that film, in that program, that's a narcissist.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to me. You know, I went from just studying human design and studying DNA and the yes. characteristics, and then I was led into narcissism. And when I started reading the traits and the indications that that you might be dealing with a narcissistic individual, I realized that my dad was passing the test with flying colors. So yes. Yeah, all of this time it's like, wow, my dad actually fits into these categories, and now I'm just in the process of finding out what type he was, and I believe that he was either a lesser or a mid-range, but he has traits from so many different categories, including sociopathy and psychopathy as well. So it's so, like you said, it's such a big range to look into. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's everywhere, but it is empowering, and that's also why I reached out to you. But
yes,
going back to the previous question where you spoke on what you all look for in public, when I was listening to you name certain characteristics, like the person walking their dog, and even you going as far as to spill a drink on someone to see how they would react.
Yes.
I noticed that a lot of those characteristics, I could actually see a narcissist in those positions as well. I could see a narcissist, walking a dog or playing those roles, I guess, that a natural empathic person would play for purposes of attracting, a empathic individual. Would you say that is the case?
Of course, there are certain outward appearances that both empathic and narcissistic individuals will share. You can have a well-dressed empath and a well-dressed narcissist, of course. Mm-hmm. But what we do is you will look for certain things and you put them all together to form a picture. The key ones are finding the empathic traits. Mm-hmm. And once those are in place, then you fine-tune it in terms of determining the factors. So, for example, a somatic is not going to hang around a library looking for his victims, because they will not be suited to him. What he will do is he will spend his time in high-end bars, because he knows that the people in there, and there will be his own kind in there, of course, although most narcissists don't know what they are, so they won't recognize them as other narcissists. But he will realize, I want somebody who is good looking because I place a value on that. I want somebody who's well dressed. I want somebody who likes to go out. So they're going to find that person there. But at the same time, they will sniff out the empathic traits. So they will see that person who is shuttling the drinks back and forth for the group because they like to make sure that everybody has something to drink. Or they see one of their friends sat on their own, and they get them up to dance. Those types of things. Whereas the narcissist, of course, wouldn't care about their friend being on their own. They would just be in the middle of the dance floor, throwing some shapes to gain all admiring looks from everybody else in the club or the bar. So there are a range of things that one would look for. And it's putting them together as a package that allows us to identify what they are. A lot of it's instinctive in terms of what we look for. We can tell naturally by the way that people are engaging in what they do. And of course, the higher cognitive function of the narcissist, the greater degree of observation and calculation goes into identifying those traits as well.
Okay, thank you for going more in depth with that.
You're welcome.
I've learned that holidays are high predatory days for narcissists and times where victims and targets are warned to watch out for your kind. Valentine's Day is coming up. Can you share what the feelings, plots, and schemes are for narcissists towards targets and what people should look out for to avoid getting lured into the traps?
Yes, holidays are high predatory days because of the level of expectation that people have in terms of being with somebody, having a boyfriend or girlfriend to share Christmas with, or a birthday with, or particular national holidays, and especially, as you identify, Valentine's Day coming up. So because of people's expectations and their susceptibility to feeling that they should adopt to the model of having a partner and not wanting to be on their own and feeling sad at that particular time of year, that means those people will be vulnerable to somebody paying attention to them around that time. So in the lead up to Valentine's Day, if you find that an individual is suddenly engaging you online with particular vigor, or somebody at your gym starts to engage in conversations with you, it's not determinative in itself, but this may well be a narcissist who is well aware that you are perhaps feeling lonely, and that loneliness is compounded by Valentine's Day approaching, which means that you want to get into a relationship, and therefore that'll be exploited by the narcissist. The needs identified. The holidays create needs because of the expectations. Somebody to go on vacation with, somebody to sit in front of a roaring log fire at Christmas with, because of the construct that society, particularly Western society, has created with the concept of love and being involved with somebody else. So there are ripe times in the lead up to these particular events for our kind to exploit it by seeking out people who will have that expectation and therefore be more susceptible to our overtures.
That was a perfect answer. Makes so much sense. Yeah, the Western society and just the programs that they create, I feel that it's really the foundation of all of this. Like, even down to narcissism itself, I really believe is based on these programs.
Yes.
Yeah.
What society has done is create an ideal in terms of how people are expected to behave towards one another.
Yes.
In terms of romantic love. And I don't understand what love is in the sense of I don't feel it, because that is part of how my development was stymied. But what I do understand is what people think love is. I understand what people expect the manifestation of that love to be. And that manifestation is what has been forced down people's throats by society and the media, so that people think it is about certain romantic gestures, that is what love is. And by creating this plethora of gestures, that provides us with repeated conduits towards our victims, because the outward expression of what is purportedly love, to be through the buying of gifts, the giving of flowers, the writing of poetry, the standing outside of your window and serenading you, all of these different things, if you really analyse it, is that what love really is? Not from what my victims have told me. They've told me that love is something entirely different, but that is a manifestation of it. And it's what people have been conditioned to expect. So if they're conditioned to expect it, I'm perfectly happy to mimic it, so they think that I am showing them love. I'm not. I'm incapable of it. But they don't realise that.
Yeah, I get that. And I've always been a person that I was never I was never drawn to what society said was correct. So, you know,
Yes.
the whole idea of love and the flowers and the chocolates, like that was just something that I never, it never did anything for me. But based on society's standards, I thought that there was something wrong with me because.
Well, there you are, exactly. And that's an excellent example. And you're quite right to make that point, because not everybody subscribes to that being the concept of love. But that doesn't matter, because there are sufficient millions who do,
Right.
that will provide us with viable victims. So there may be people listening and saying, well, I don't care anything for a box of chocolates, and I don't care if he comes riding down the street with a rose sticking out of his bottom. It really doesn't interest me. I look for something more substantial. Well, if you do, then you're unlikely to be ensnared by our kind, because you provide us with fewer means by which to delude you and create an illusion. All of these things play into giving us tools by which to create the illusion. Whereas if it was all about certain loving actions, support, compassion, empathy, we would be exposed, because I don't feel compassion, and I can exhibit it to an extent, but there would come a point where I would either be identified that it was false, or I wouldn't be able to sustain it because it wasn't achieving what I wanted. But because I'm able to rely on all of these other facets and the creation of this wonderful concept of love that forms the illusion, the real elements of love which people describe, which I've heard them talk about, get lost in all of the smoke and mirrors. And of course, smoke and mirrors is what we thrive on.
Yes. Wow. And you you just helped me to realize something about myself. When I would attract somebody who was either a narcissist or very highly narcissistic,
Yes.
I would feel this invisible cage coming over me. It was like they were trying to cage me, and they
Yes.
would, you know, use things that were based on what, you know, Western society's idea of how to court someone or love someone, and that would be the things that made me run away. So
Yes.
I've never been caught in a narcissistic relationship or trap for a long period of time. They were always very short term, because I had these instincts that said that I feel something from this person is trying to control me and trying to lure me into something that is just not a part of who I am, and I would just get out. So I can't
Yes.
say that I'm a victim of narcissistic abuse, but I do know that I'm a very strong magnet for narcissists, and I'm learning why. I'm learning more and more each day why I have always attracted these types of people. But yeah, like it's always been too superficial for me, and
Yes.
I see, based on what you're saying, is because you all take the majority and that's what you mirror, but you can't mirror the things that have more depth to it.
Correct.
Like the compassion and I think about, instead of like flowers, I'm thinking about things that could actually, lay a foundation for something in the future. Like I think about bigger things than the superficial stuff. So that
Yes.
was something that could never be, given in a genuine way by the people that I was attracting. And you're bringing it all to light.
Absolutely.
Are there narcissists who purposely mirror codependence to attract other narcissists? And if so, why would they do that?
Narcissists wouldn't do that to attract other narcissists if they are less raw mid-range, because of course they aren't able to recognize other narcissists. So there wouldn't be any purposeful intent on their part to try and attract another narcissist. A greater might do it, I suppose, for the purpose of trying to lure in another narcissist. There would have to be some overriding objective that the greater had, that the other narcissist, who would be lesser or mid-range, would serve for the greater to allow him to engage in doing so. The reason for this is that empaths provide us with the better fuel. Narcissists can provide another narcissist with some fuel because they get angry, they get frustrated, they get jealous, they exhibit hate. But it doesn't last necessarily for long enough, and it isn't potent enough, and so on and so forth. And so a lesser may unwittingly attract another lesser, and a mid-ranger may unwittingly attract another mid-ranger. But a greater would only choose to attract another narcissist if there was some overriding reason to do so that would serve the greater over and above the provision of fuel, because otherwise attracting a narcissist is not a particularly good way of gaining fuel. So it might be that they might recruit that narcissist because it's a lesser who they can rely on perhaps to behave as a bit of a blunt instrument to go and cause trouble amongst another group of people that would serve the business aims, for example, of a greater. So they might do that. And therefore, in order to draw that lesser in, the greater may well decide to mirror codependent behaviour. They may use charm. They may use the promise of monetary reward. They may use threat or intimidation. But they may well use that form of mirroring as well. So there may be circumstances, but I would say that it would be rare. And no, I haven't done that.
Do lessers, mid-rangers, and graders ever end up in situations to where they openly battle each other for a high-grade source of supply? For instance, at a function that would draw in narcissists, codependents, and empaths. If you have ended up in situations like that, have you ever not won the targeted fuel source? If so, did that upset you and make you want to get revenge on the other narcissists, or the target for not choosing you, or both of them? And how did you go about your revenge?
Yes, we do openly battle each other for a particularly potent source of fuel, as you identify the function. Many people there, and they may be somebody that exhibits considerable empathic traits, and therefore we are instinctively drawn to them. And a number of narcissists may well be looking to engage with this person. And in such a situation, a greater such as myself would easily repel the lessers and mid-rangers by knowing exactly how to cause them to do something unsavoury. So I would purposefully wound a lesser so he lost his temper and stormed off. I would purposefully wound a mid-ranger so he would get into a sulk. I would also exhibit greater charm, etc. So I would effectively outmaneuver and outflank them. So there hasn't been a situation where I've not won, but there are many occasions where our kind will end up battling one another. Most of the time they don't realise what they're engaging with because they don't recognise one another. But it happens repeatedly. And in certain instances you effectively have a knock-off between our kind as they're competing for the fuel. But of course, they may well be gaining fuel from one another in the process, even though they don't know that the other is a narcissist.
A narc-off? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yes, basically a narc-off, where they're trying to show off their own particular skill set in order to impress somebody and belittle somebody they perceive as a competitor.
Wow.
You may get creators who team up in order to achieve some greater aim between them.
Yes.
It can happen, yes.
When I look at everything that you've shared and the information I've gathered, I can remember a situation to where I believe it was two higher range narcissists. I don't know if they were graders, but they definitely had high narcissistic personalities, and they were in a narc off, and one of them did get narked off. Like, it was very clear.
Yes.
That's very, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
No. And once you recognise the hour kind and you see it happen, if you're so predisposed, you could use it to your advantage in terms of manipulation and see them turn on one another.